Hey everyone, Dr. Jen from Wellness in 2 Words here, and I just want to say, number one, Happy New Year. This is, for those of you who are new to my page, I'm an ER physician who also has a background as a hospice medical director currently, and I have a passion for wellness, and this page started out as a wellness page, but it quickly morphed into a COVID information type site. So I thank you for being here, and I appreciate your support, and if you're seeing this on YouTube, please hit the little bell, subscribe, look for notifications so that when I do post a video, I kind of do them every 1 or 2 weeks or so, depending on the need for getting information out there and depending on my schedule. So that way you'll be notified and you can subscribe to the channel, and I would appreciate your support. If you're watching this on Facebook, thank you very much as well. So let's get into it. So Happy New Year. I'm excited to say I received my first dose of the Moderna vaccine. Now, I received that at a rural hospital that I staff at, that I work at periodically. And the reason why it was Moderna was because of the cold chain storage requirements. That was a much better choice for that hospital, and I'm very grateful to have received it. I got it 1 week ago, and I'll be getting the second dose at the end of January, so it'll be 28 days later. So far, no serious side effects other than I had kind of a sore arm for a couple of days. I was a little tired, and what's weird is I had a headache, and I thought, why do I have such a headache? This is crazy. And then I realized I had some new glasses I was trying out that are not prescription, and they were pinching my head. They were too small, and when I changed back to the pink ones, no problem, headache went away like literally within 20 minutes. So I think that was not a significant reaction. Also, for people who've gotten the vaccine, there is an app that you can go to called VSafe app where you can report adverse effects, so they can kind of be tracking that in real time and get good information. So it's helpful to know that they're staying on top of that using technology. So, all right, so I recommend getting the vaccine, and before you accuse me of spreading fear or creating issues, I think if you have to take a step back, take the emotion out of it, take the politics out of it, and just simply say, what we have here is a huge public health math problem. There are 330 million Americans. As of right now, we've had almost 5 million people vaccinated. The adverse side effects that have been reported are very minimal. The ones that have made the news, if you ask me, aren't really of significance when you consider the whole number of people doing that, and we'll kind of get to that in a minute. But I think the the benefits of getting the vaccine definitely outweigh the risks of getting the vaccine, and I'm going to go through that for you now. So let's talk about what's happening in my body, first of all, 1 week post-vaccine. So I have this great little chart right here, kind of written all over it, but this little chart is kind of a graphic to show you kind of what happens. So you've got incubation period, and then you've got the time 0 starting where you generate immune response. So the first week, you tend to make what's called IgM. It peaks at the end of the first week, which is where I am. So right now I have IgM antibodies. They're kind of the immature first wave of antibodies until you get your like Navy SEALs antibodies. This is infantry, this is Navy SEALs, right? And that's going to occur more like at week 2. They're going to peak, and then they're going to stay at a steady level for protection for up to 120 days, which is almost 4 months. So immunity starts to wane, the acute phase of immunity starts to wane at around 3 to 4 months. So for instance, when Trump got the antibody cocktail, he was like, I'm immune. Well, you kind of had what's called passive immunity, which is what infants get from their mothers, where they get an infusion of antibodies in breast milk, and then they are existing in the circulation for 90 to 120 days. And then that resets unless you have cells that can make more antibodies, which is the kicker. If you get passive immunity, you don't generate your own intrinsic immunity, and then the clock kind of resets. You're just as susceptible as you were before you got the antibody infusion. So that's just a brief explanation of how antibodies work. Okay, so IgM first, then IgG next, and then at week 4, I'm going to get a challenge with the booster. Now, that booster is going to reintroduce it's just going to reintroduce the mRNA fragment, because that would have already been degraded and taken out of circulation. It's going to reintroduce it and then kind of like amp up the immune response to be like, hey, see this guy? He's back. And then my body is going to attack it. So remember, I had the other video which talked about the mRNA fragment's kind of like a USB drive wrapped in bubble wrap because it's fragile and it's got a charge on it, and it can be degraded if it's not taken in and put into production quickly. So it's the USB drive in the bubble wrap that goes in the mailbox, which is like the channel gating for the cell, and it gets into the ribosome, which is like the Kinko's printer, and that's going to generate a bunch of wanted posters for Spike. Then Spike, those wanted posters go out into circulation. So what happens is there are special cells called antigen presenting cells. They're kind of all kind of peppered throughout the body. In the muscle, myocytes, they're usually monocytes, which is a particular special kind of cell. That is like your neighborhood watch. So you make all the protein, you make all the wanted posters, you decide to, on those cells, even present the antigen like a billboard to say, hey guys, you need Ebola, you need to be looking for this guy. And then the neighborhood watch is kind of like these antigen presenting cells, and they're just talking all about it. And then they go and recruit the help of the police and law enforcement, which is going to be your T cells and your B cells that are going to be highly specialized and start making antibodies to intercept this Spike guy whenever they see him. So the reason that they targeted the Spike protein is it's kind of like the guy in the gang who knows the secret knock, who can kind of get in. So because he's an entry protein, it made the most sense to try to intercept that one. And the good news is, again, there seems to be good conservation of genome so far to help us target that protein. Now, these are my top 5 reasons why I chose to get the vaccine and why I would recommend the vaccine to other people, okay? So make sure I'm on target with all this stuff. Number 1, I'm gonna say this, it's gonna be controversial, and I know this, but we are not going to end this pandemic without a vaccine. I'm gonna repeat that. I'm gonna put myself out there. We are not gonna end this pandemic without a vaccine, period. Now I want you to kind of think, and if you decided to stop listening, sorry, see ya. Think about smallpox, think about paralytic variants of polio. I, as a physician, have seen a child die from meningitis. The ones who survived meningococcal meningitis are the ones who went on to have lots of problems like kidney failure, and they were deaf and just had amputations of extremities, just horrible stuff that we don't even see anymore because of aggressive vaccination campaigns. Haemophilus influenza, you're gonna be like, what the heck is that? It's not even a Haemophilus influenza. It's not a virus. It's actually a bacteria. But it caused epiglottitis. It also caused meningitis. Again, we just don't see that anymore in the pediatric populations that get vaccinated against it. So horrible, disabling, and deadly diseases that we don't see. And people forget. They forget that they existed. I've seen them in my 20 years of medicine in my career. I haven't seen smallpox, I haven't seen polio. And we're close to eradicating polio. We haven't gotten there yet, but we're very, very close. They haven't declared it eradicated because of very small areas where it pops up. But I even have a scar from my smallpox vaccination because I was born in 1969. I'm 51 years old, and I'm grateful for it. My kids don't have one, but when you look at the mortality, smallpox mortality was almost 30%, and those who survived were disfigured from the scars. Paralytic polio, anywhere from 5 to 20%, depending on your age. Meningococcemia, 10 to 40% mortality, or you had lifelong consequences. Haemophilus, only 3 to 6%, but it is very scary when you see someone with epiglottitis. And I have seen someone with epiglottitis, and you're afraid they're going to lose their airway and die on you, and you won't be able to rescue it. So I'm passionate about this because I come to this from the place of medicine. I know that vaccines work, and I know that they are effective, and I know that some people have questions about them. Again, I don't support mandatory vaccination, and I know there are some people who have had personal experiences that make them wary or that they attribute to vaccines, and that is anecdotal. But when you look at long-term evidence, again, I support vaccination. So my kids have been vaccinated, and I'll continue to do so. So herd immunity is not likely unless we have a large percentage of the population that either have natural immunity or vaccine-induced immunity. And when you look at the immune response that's generated from the vaccine versus natural infection, it is far stronger when you vaccinate someone. So that's something I want people to be aware of. You can say, well, I'll get the virus, I'll be fine, I'll have immunity from it. Well, that's not necessarily going to give you the strongest immunity. So I would definitely favor vaccine-generated immunity over natural immunity. I'm sorry, I have a kitten that's getting into something. Knock over the phone. Okay. When you look at pandemic cycles, the acute cycle lasts anywhere from 1 to 2 years. The polio cycle was far longer, but 1 to 2 years. We're already 1 year into this. So if we can get a vaccine that actually gets us to some level of herd immunity, we can actually shorten the pandemic cycle, which would be good for so many reasons, personal reasons, for economic reasons, for just how we're social creatures and we need to be around each other for support. So, and the problem is right now we have this population where you have this rolling infection. So if we can get a good vaccination campaign and get out there and get a lot of people simultaneously immune, we can break the cycle of rolling infection where people get it, they get exposed, there's a potential for reinfection or mutation of the strain. Right now we're seeing a more infectious strain kind of circulating, which brings me to my second point. So, well, first of all, second reason. So first reason is we're not going to end this pandemic without a vaccine, period. Number two, you don't want this virus, period. You don't want it. If people who get it go, well, I had it and it wasn't that bad, but let's kind of back that up. If you're exposed to the mRNA in the vaccine or any of the other formulations where you're exposed to viral proteins and you get natural infection, you're exposed to the same viral proteins plus other stuff, and the inflammation and the damage from having the natural infection from the virus, why wouldn't you just opt for the vaccine? Your body's going to see the mRNA anyway. If you think you're not going to get infected with COVID, right. Everyone's going to see this virus at some point just because of its level of circulation. So I would rather be prepared and get a vaccine, which is going to highlight the protein that my body's going to see anyway if I get infected, and be ahead of the game. We, as a nation, we're obese, we're unhealthy, we have lots of health problems. There's going to be a lot of long-term morbidity from COVID, but let me just kind of run through the things that we are seeing post-COVID syndrome or during acute COVID infections. There's neurological effects. We know it affects the cranial nerves and potentially the brainstem in terms of oxygen regulation and respiratory drive. People have their oxygen low and they don't even have air hunger. Also loss of sense of smell and taste. So we know it has intracranial effects. There's vasculitis, which is inflammation of the lining of the blood vessels. It should be very smooth, like a smooth pipe. Instead, you get inflammation and corrosion, and people get microcirculation problems. They're having, the COVID toes, which is they lose their toes because of basically auto amputation from clots. Pulmonary clots, there are lots of people that are having pulmonary emboli with it and have to be on blood thinners. Myocarditis, which is heart damage, cardiomyopathy from it. Respiratory damage long-term. People are having long-term fibrosis if they don't die of respiratory failure initially. A lot of them are having long-term lung scarring. Strokes, heart attacks because of all the thrombotic events. Even pregnancies could be compromised because of thrombosis. So just keep in mind, you don't want the virus. It's got a lot of bad stuff with it. So number three, this vaccine is safe and effective with a low side effect profile. And trust me, I've been kind of looking in all the physician groups and people are talking about their side effects, very minimal side effects. So far, there have been 5 million people in the United States that have received the vaccine. That's a huge number of people. Now, let's look at what's making the news, because there's obviously an agenda to kind of get people stirred up and confused and afraid. What made the news? There was a nurse that had passed out. So she had a history of prior vasovagal events. I don't even know why they would highlight her as a spokesperson, because she's the worst person to get up there, be like, oh yeah, I got the vaccine, and pass out. Well, she has a history of passing out. There's a doctor in Mexico that apparently got the vaccine and had some encephalomyelitis is what they're calling it. They still haven't figured all that out. She has a history of allergic reactions and inflammatory syndrome. So again, I would not hone in on her. I would say, well, that's 1 out of 5 million. There's a nurse that's 1 out of 5 million. There have been a few allergic reactions. They're very scattered. It's, again, when you look at a numbers game, natural infection versus vaccine reaction, far likely to have problems if you get natural infection versus getting the vaccine. It's a very, very, very small number of people with side effects. Let's see. And most severe reactions with vaccines are either very immediate or you might have some delayed reaction. Most of the data, we know that people are at least 2 months out from the trials or longer on the phase 3 trials. So we have a pretty good idea that it's very safe and it's very effective. The only reason you really want to opt out is if you had a very significant reaction to the first dose. And when you say significant, they're talking about anaphylaxis or an anaphylactoid reaction. Okay, so fourth reason, this vaccine is a very clean vaccine. It's like most pared down that you could possibly get. It contains a very small fragment of mRNA, which is the blueprint for just the protein and nothing else. It does not contain live virus. This protein is not able to, the mRNA is not able to reincorporate into the nucleus. It's very, very hard to get something back into the nucleus. It's kind of like a mini Fort Knox. So I gave the example of it being a USB drive that generates from your original computer files, which you don't want tampered with. So not only would you have a firewall, you've got a front door, you've got like 2 or 3 deadbolts. It's very hard to get back into the primary nucleus of the cell. And it's protected for a good reason. So this mRNA would be degraded pretty quickly if it doesn't get incorporated into the ribosome to make proteins for expression. It gets degraded pretty quickly by ribonucleases. So some arguments have been, well, there are these enzymes called reverse transcriptases, which would encode it, basically code it back to a DNA type sample instead of keeping it mRNA. But I would guarantee you the ribonucleases are going to get to it faster because naked mRNA is really kind of an inflammatory compound, and so which is why they don't need an adjuvant for it for the vaccine. They don't need something to amp up your immune response. Your immune system's will be like, what is this, and start working on trying to get it sorted out. Like, I don't want the whole viral genome in my body because we know that some viruses are actually connected to cancer. Like type 1 diabetes is often after a viral prodrome, and we still haven't been able to figure out how to vaccinate and prevent that, although they're working on it. Cancers are associated with viral infections. So I would rather not get the viral infection. I'd rather get the vaccine because at least I know my body can kind of take it. Good thing is this is 95% effective against prevention of disease. Now that 5%, hope that's not me, but again, 95% effective against prevention of contracting the disease. Now, what we don't know is whether or not it prevents transmission to other people. Are you capable of taking the virus out quickly enough that you won't infect someone else if you get exposed? That will impact whether or not we have to keep wearing masks long term. That data will come in, but we have to be patient. We have to be patient. It sucks to be patient. Here's the other thing too. This is a little side. I am completely shocked that a pharmacist, the Wisconsin pharmacist, took vials out to deliberately compromise them before they were injected into people. And in my opinion, he should lose his license. That is completely unethical. You took an oath to treat people to the best of your ability, and he's been recognized as a conspiracy theorist. But either way, any medical professional who does something like that would endanger somebody either directly or indirectly is completely unacceptable. And if we get to the headspace where that's okay because the end justifies the means, then I think we're all doomed. Like, medical professionals need to stay above board and keep their primary objective, which is to take care of people. And if you don't want to get a vaccine, quit your job. But don't take vials out, stick them on a counter, compromise their integrity by exposing them to room temperature, put them back and pretend it never happened, and then give the vaccine to people who then, those people are going to behave as if they have received an adequate vaccine. It's completely unethical, and it boggles my mind that somebody would even do that. So, soapbox. So, other thing too is know that they didn't do any safety shortcuts in the formulation of these vaccines. I mean, these are large numbers of people, anywhere from 30 to 60,000 participants in phase 3. They've monitored them there very closely. I have no concerns about the safety data that they've generated from the phase 3 trials. It was a double-blinded study with a true placebo. People actually were able to tell, a lot of them were, if they got the vaccine because their arm was either sore or not, but that you can't really prevent that. And it included people who'd already had COVID, which helps rule out the whole idea of antibody-enhanced dependent stuff that goes on the cell. That's a whole different conversation, but they basically made sure that previous COVID infection did not endanger people by creating a different pathway for antibody mechanisms. Okay, and reason number 5, I'm gonna go over all the reasons in a minute, but reason number 5, the window to get ahead of this virus is actually closing. We've already seen more infectious strains developing, which means that as it circulates, it's going to mutate more. Right now, it appears that the vaccine is effective against these more infectious strains. What's going to happen down the road, we don't know, but we want to get that herd immunity and that vaccine-induced immunity as quickly as possible before more mutations occur. And let me kind of walk you through why this new infectious strain is more of a problem. So viruses that have a long incubation that also mutate are a problem because you've got this window where people are infectious and they don't know, they're pre-symptomatic, so they're transmitting it to other people. They're not showing overt symptoms, so they don't quarantine themselves and take themselves out of circulation. So more deadly viruses, more acutely deadly viruses like Ebola and things like that, it's very evident people are sick while they're infectious very quickly. They get quarantined out, they get treated quickly. They're not infecting more people. This virus is different. It's kind of flying below the radar, and so more people are going to get infected. Well, so if your mortality rate is staying the same, it's not more deadly, it's killing the same percentage of people across the board, but you have more people getting infected, therefore more cases, you're going to have more casualties, and it's totally going to wreck our healthcare system. In California, they're already having to ration healthcare. They're already saying, if you can't resuscitate somebody on the scene, don't transport them to the hospital. Take them to the morgue. We don't have space for them. We can't do it. Some of the older buildings are having issues with oxygen capability at high flow. They're trying to get the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers to kind of retrofit some of this stuff so they can accommodate this high flow that people need with this hypoxemia from the virus. So it's already stressing the healthcare system. So the more people that are out there getting the virus, because there's still a substantial part of our population that hasn't been exposed yet, it's just going to stress the healthcare system. So our window is closing. We know that January is going to be bad. December was already worse than we'd had ever historically. We had more hospitalizations. The number of hospitalizations in the ICU attributed to COVID jumped from 16% in September to 40% in December, and January will probably be worse. So that's a huge percentage of ICU population attributed to active infection from the virus. Okay, so I think that's probably the high points of that. The biggest thing that we want to know that they're going to be watching is you can have antibodies produced from the vaccine, but the biggest question, are you going to be able to get really good, robust, long-term cell-mediated immunity? That means do you have T cells and B cells who are hanging around, who are going to be able to amp up a response if they see this virus? It's like your old Navy SEAL team who's like, call me in, I'm on call, something happens, I remember this guy, I remember I did this before, we can do this. Okay, so let me just run the top 5 reasons and I'll leave you alone. Thanks for your support. We're not going to end this pandemic without a vaccine, period. Number 2, you don't want this virus, period. Number 3, it's safe and effective with very low risk of adverse side effects. Number 4, it's not the virus that you're given, it's a fragment of the genome, and I would rather have that than actual infection with the virus. Either way, you're going to get exposed. And number 5, the window to get ahead of this virus is rapidly closing. So I would encourage you, do your own research if you have to. Do it from reputable sources. Don't look at just like these crazy websites. Look at Bloomberg, Healthline. Some of the ones that I've gone to, which give me links to actual research studies that are very helpful. But I just want everybody to be safe. I do this. It's free. I don't do it out of any political motivation. I don't have an agenda. I just want people to make smart decisions, and I want them to have the knowledge to be able to do that, and then not be afraid to make that decision, because God knows there's enough of that out there right now. It can make a sane person crazy. I just want us to get back to normal. I want my kids to be able to go back to school and socialize with friends. I want to be able to socialize with my community and support my community. And I think the sooner that a lot of us understand this vaccine is safe, and that we can take it and protect other people and ourselves, the sooner we can get back to some semblance of normal. So if you have any questions or comments, please link them below. Let me know. I will try my best to respond to them in the next videos, and I just want everybody to stay safe and stay well. So thank you for your support, and take care. And I will make another video too after I get the second dose of the vaccine. Now, some people say they get a significant fever and other stuff. Oh, here's the other thing. If you do get the vaccine, don't take ibuprofen for the fever. If you can run a fever safely, do it, because that's all inflammatory chemicals, cytokines. They're doing their job. They're talking to your cells. They're getting everybody on board. It's like if you took Tylenol or Motrin, you're jamming the communication systems for the Navy SEALs. Don't do that if you can help it. Now, if you have seizures linked to fever and other stuff like that, then definitely take Tylenol. I would take Tylenol over Motrin because Motrin tends to shut down inflammation more than Tylenol, which kind of just attacks the fever and pain. So that's just my little tidbit of advice on that. So, all right. So I will see you after my next dose of vaccine, but hopefully we'll do another video before then to kind of just update things. All right. Thanks for your support. Take care. Bye.